We should get started with the May meeting of the Front Gardens Network. Welcome to everyone who's joined. I'm Paul De Silva, I'm the chair of the network. I liaise with Alice closely on building the network and running the meetings and the newsletter. And today we have three speakers on a watery theme, a strongly watery theme, which is always topical because of public concern about it, whether it's pollution or drought or floods um, or resilience. There's a good word. Um, so it feels really apposite to be talking about this and to hear what practical action people are doing and findings people are obtaining from their work. So I'm going to we will keep an eye on the chat box. So feel free if you have questions or comments you want to put in the chat to speakers. We'll save questions to the end, i.e. of each speaker. There'll be interaction. And we'll follow up with the newsletter. And if you haven't signed up to the newsletter, then please do that. We'll provide links to that if you're not sure. Um, so feel free to use the chat box and to vibe and bounce off each other. That's what it's there for. We will aim to finish on the hour, so in 55 minutes time. But there's a bit of wiggle room at the end if people want to carry on chatting. I'm going to hand over to Alice to introduce the session and provide a bit of context. Thanks, Alice.
Oh, just unmute myself. So yeah, thanks everybody for coming. And I just really wanted to go over some slides that I've shown before. So hopefully not too many of you will have seen all of these before, but I do think it's important. So part of the reason that we talk about front gardens is about de-paving and regreening is about the problem of water runoff, so rainwater running off into sewers in London, and so I just wanted to quickly go over why that's such an important problem. So a few slides here. I'm just going to leave it. I'm not going to put it on slideshow so I can jump between slides quickly. So yeah, London is just a big network of rivers, really. So big floodplain. So lots of water running off roads and into rivers, and lots of need for places which can absorb water like that. But of course, we have lots of paved surface like that too. And of course, a lot of front gardens, which some of which are lovely and absorb water, but many of which are paved, just completely paved. So the water will go either down into the sewers and off onto the road, or down into the sewers that you'll have in your house, and that will take those will take crucially they'll take rainwater from the roof as well, and that also will end up in the sewers. And why is that a problem? Well, because the sewer system in London is constrained, heavily constrained. So this map is I'll put the link to this presentation in the chat afterwards, after I've spoken, and you can have a look through it if you want. But this is a map, Thames Water map, of where the sewage network is constrained in London. That means that when it rains heavily, the sewers can't cope. And that means that either the water goes straight out into the rivers that are nearby, or where you don't have rivers, or where they've been covered, it might even come up back into people's houses and cause flooding as well. So one of the biggest challenges for London at the moment is to what's called attenuate rainwater, so stop it from going down the sewers, hold on to it, or let it flow slowly. That's the map of London according to Thames Water. Of course, there's also the problem of capacity at the sewage treatment plants. So if you see that one in Mogden, they're already at capacity. They're really struggling in many others that either need upgrade or just don't have the capacity. Of course, Beckton, of course, now has the super sewer, which is just a gigantic holding tank. So that's good for that particular part of London. But if it has constraints in the branch network, then you may still see flooding even in the Beckton catchment. So yeah, significant problems in London with coping with water, rainwater. And then I think can you tell me if I change tab, you can see this? Somebody tell me if you can
Yeah,
see combined sewer.
yeah,
So this is what happens when your sewage, so the sewage from your house is combined with the rainwater, so it goes into uh, the same sewage network, the same pipe, and as long as there's not too much of it, it will go to the water recycling centre, so that's the water treatment plant. But if there's too much, it has an overflow system, and that just goes straight into the rivers. So which is why we end up with sewage in our rivers often, although there are other reasons, but that's the main reason. So yeah, that was really all I wanted to say by way of context to today's session which is about the importance of front gardens in attenuating water in London and happily the action that's going on around London to try to show that front gardens can really contribute to the effort to clean up our rivers and to manage flooding. So yeah, that's all from me for now.
brilliant. Thanks, Alice. So with that kind of important context, taking a London-wide view and understanding how it applies at street or neighbourhood level, our first speaker is Ruchi Sayal from Barnet Local Authority, um, who's able. Thanks very much for joining us, and you're a senior flood risk manager. So, and local authorities, we should be remind ourselves are also flood authorities. You have statutory duties
Jeez.
on flood. Have to have a flood plan for your area as well, don't you? So it's a big job. We tend to think of flooding as being Environment Agency only, but it's there's a bunch of people involved other than that. And so you're going to talk to us about sustainable drainage and action for the Silkstream. Is that right?
That's right. And more specifically about property level sustainable drainage systems.
So great. Over to you. Thanks.
Brilliant. Thanks, Paul. I'll just quickly share my screen, and if I can just get a heads up if you all can see it, that would be brilliant. Is that
It's coming. Oh, that's showing your email.
We can see
yeah?
your emails at the moment, not the. There
There
we
we
are.
go. There we go.
Yeah?
We're okay. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. So yeah, as Paul mentioned, I'm here to talk about property level SuDS, but just quickly introducing myself, although he introduced me slightly. I'm Ruchi, working as a senior flood risk manager in London Borough of Barnet in a lead local flood authority role, and I'm also working as a project lead on Action for Silkstream project, which is one of the 25 national projects funded by DEFRA in their resilience, flood and coastal resilience innovation program, which started in 2021 and is now almost in its final year of delivery in 2027. And the program itself is managed by Environment Agency, and Barnet was fortunate enough to receive a chunk of funding of £6 million to start with, uh, to for this project idea, which was developed 6 years ago. The project itself, in single line, is nature-based solutions in or natural flood management or sustainable drainage system in urban context, and how can we make these projects work or deliver or install them in urban areas and urban boroughs by in North London. And it's a partnership project with London Borough of Harrow. And it's managing urban rivers and flood risk. And in the last 5 years, we've delivered quite a lot of wetlands, river restoration works, SuDS on highways, SuDS in schools. Yes, it's kind of a complete package of nature-based solutions in an urban catchment in North London. But today here, I'm not talking about action for Silkstream in detail, but just a very small but significant work stream of the project, which is property level SuDS. So originally we called it as community funding idea, which is now being called as property level SuDS, but the project mainly aimed to incentivize residents to undertake property level SuDS within their private properties through simple measures like water butts and SuDS planters, which are both shown in the images below, and basically able to treat rainwater as resource. As Alice was just explaining, how that rainwater ends up being, after mixing up with sewage, ends up being in the sewage treatment systems. But really, that rainwater is not wastewater, it's clean water. It can be reused for various purposes. Of course, not for drinking, but yeah, various others, gardening and all. And it can be treated as a resource. And ideally, if you're talking about sustainability, it's completely going against sustainability for this water ending up being in the sewage treatment plants to be treated again. And that's what this project really kind of tried to incentivize, close to the properties, which underpins the principle of sustainable urban drainage systems, really close to the source where the rainfall is falling. You're trying to capture the rainfall there. And that's why it brilliantly ticks off all the boxes and is capturing the rainwater where it is falling. And when when we kind of conceived this idea of trialing this project, and if we can make it work, we did a very rough calculations to see, and we were surprised to see if all the London households, not nationally, install measures like water butts and SuDS planters, we can reuse more than 150 trillion liters of rainfall, or billion, sorry, 140 billion liters of rainfall, and can significantly reduce the risk of urban flooding and the pressure on our drainage systems, which really set the driver for this project. And we were up for trialing it out as part of Action for Silkstream. So yeah, I've just talked through the journey of last probably 2-3 years now. But basically, when we started, it was from the council's perspective. Of course, there was a bit of, at times there may be a bit of hesitation from the council itself that whether these property level SuDS could actually deliver any benefit to the council itself, because as these drain pipes from the private properties are really connecting to water companies' sewer systems, but so does the council really need to intervene? But then the question followed up with that was, can we really tag water? Whose water is it? Is it the council's water or is it the water company's water? Can we really name tag it? And that's when basically we figured a way around it. It has to be a collaborative effort, because ultimately the water does end up going into the sewer system, but when it overwhelms and start appearing on the roads which are getting flooded or the properties, it becomes the council's responsibility. So it comes down to the collaborative effort and the collaborative benefit all the parties can achieve out of it. So yeah, there's no harm in kind of a council upstepping and taking up this. It doesn't have to be always water company led, but it can be a council led initiative as well. To start with, we started engaging with a pilot area which was called Broadfields Estate in Barnet. It's in northern Barnet, Edgware area. A 500 property pilot area was selected. It was a combined decision of Thames Water and the council to choose this area, or to kind of select this area, because it was on a high priority list for both the risk management authorities. And we had some maximum reports of sewer flooding in this area. So this was kind of looked like the really right area to try the pilot on. And from the residents' perspective, actually, I was quite positive to begin with, because I thought, why would no one like a free water butt or a SuDS planter being offered by the council, which is being delivered and installed on their property? If I'm given an opportunity, I would be up for it. But I was surprised to see that despite of all the initial engagement we did, the drop-in sessions and the educational booklets we produced, there was quite a low uptake for the offer. possibly because of awareness of what these equipments do, or we don't know yet. But yeah, basically there was quite a low uptake or expression of interest for this project, pilot project. And also from the council, because although it was low risk work, it was delivering some sort of installation on a private property. So there was a pressure from our legal teams to get some legal agreements sorted out with the residents before we actually install them on private properties, just to protect the council's position. But when these legal agreements were kind of shared across with the residents who expressed their interest in this project, there was quite a lot of resistance again, because and they had a valid point, really, like, engaging with the lawyer, we can, at that comparable cost, we can just get the water bite or the SuDS plant installed on our property. We don't really need this legal agreement to be signed with the council. And that's when basically the project changed its vision last year, where we said we are, although trying to achieve the flood risk benefits from these property level SuDS, but the emphasis wouldn't be on measuring the flood risk benefits anymore, but creating the property level SuDS awareness and encouraging community behavioral change, and creating the awareness of how these equipments work, how they can help with flood risk, and it also help us to achieve the wider benefits, and creating those rainwater champions among us, the community, who would be championing this pilot project. And when the vision of the project was changed, the phase one, although with low initial uptake, at least with what we expected originally, 15 water butts and SuDS planters were installed across 13 or 12 properties within the pilot area successfully in January 2026, which was quite positive feedback. And they understood how these devices are working, how the rainwater from their gutter pipes from the roof is being redirected into the SuDS planter, how does it store it, and then eventually slow the flow towards the drainage system on the road. And once this phase one was installed, it generated a visibility, because neighbors could see it, that it has been installed. So it started acting as a demonstration tool, and which encouraged further uptake. And we started getting inquiries of, oh, is this scheme still on, and can we still participate in it? And all of the inquiries, we kind of started seeing there was an interest building up for the scheme itself, and which looked quite positive. So now these have been delivered by our contractors, Meristem Design. The residents retain the responsibility of maintaining these installed water butts and planters. The legal agreements were all scrapped off and were replaced with a single page, like a receipt document of the equipment, where we just mentioned that any unrelated risk or activities that may happen, the council will not be liable for it. And of course, these were very low risk work, and none of these were but there was not a lot of resistance received from any of the residents, just because it was quite simplified, just like a simple terms and conditions document, and which helped us to get the approval from the legal team and protect the council's position. But then also it gave us an opportunity to give us a small maintenance guidance to the residents, for those who are keen on gardening, how to look after the plants, how to look after the planter itself, and all of that, and just making it really simple for them to understand. And it's really like once it's installed, it's mainly like a gardening feature that has been installed within your property, which gives not only the aesthetic value, but also other wider environmental benefits. And now this low cost, low maintenance model, we think, or at least the project Action for Silkstream is aspiring that it will support scalability across the wider borough, and replicability across other local authorities, as well as the model can be just kind of replicated across other London boroughs. So regarding monitoring and lessons learned, so as I said, because of the low initial uptake, we couldn't monitor the flood risk benefits of this scheme, but now we are more kind of doing the behavior-led monitoring approach. How many repeat participation are we getting from the communities? How many inquiries are we getting per month? What are the community awareness and engagement levels? Do they understand better? And kind of getting the observational feedback from residents and contractors as well. We're doing some local walks in the area to just show what equipments have already been installed in some of the private properties, to just kind of again build up that momentum. So the pilot project, it demonstrates that simplicity would drive participation. If you overcomplicate stuff because you are doing things on private properties, can really hinder your participation and push back from the residents. And simplified process and clear messaging could significantly improve uptake. And of course, continuous engagement is essential to keep building up that momentum. And this initiative clearly demonstrates that property level SuDS can be delivered successfully when not framed as a flood risk infrastructure, but as a part of wider community and environmental stewardship agenda. So these are some of the lessons learned, which I thought would be worth sharing with the group on how we can also replicate this model further on. Um, Now, what the future looks like for the community funding idea or the property level SuDS. So, although we did say we're not monitoring the flood risk benefits now, but once we are targeting some specific streets where when we have most of the houses have signed up for this, we would install some sensors to kind of see how the flows have impacted in the area. We're also doing some modeling, like some desktop modeling exercises and research-based work to see how the percentage of uptake of the houses impacts the flood risk benefits. So basically predicting the benefits and trying to match it with the practical benefits by installing these sensors on site. And also now we are trying, wherever we are doing some flood alleviation schemes in the borough, flood resistance schemes, like installing a big pipeline where SuDS are possibly not one of the option, or any other nature-based schemes, and doing some engagement. We are making property level SuDS as one of the offer we are offering with our wider flood resilience schemes. And the project Action for Silkstream aspires that the council could adopt community funding concept as a project legacy to be rolled out as a continual funding stream. And we keep incentivizing residents for installing SuDS within private properties. And I don't know, would it be completely free, but at least providing them on subsidized rates, or setting up a mechanism to to make the installation much easier for them. So yeah, I think that's where I would stop. And yeah, happy to take any questions if there are.
Thanks,
Yes.
Ruchi.
I think we'll do questions at the end, Paul, if that's all right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There are some questions in the chat box already, so have a look at those if you want to add to those.
Sure.
And and we'll roll them all up at the end. Thanks so much. That's really interesting. And it's about building it up and sustaining, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's what it's about. It's not about initiativitis, as I call it. Just do it and then move on. So really interesting to see how to start almost from scratch, I suppose. Right. Thank you so much. Moving on, we've got Marcus Gayle, who is got lots of experience on water and landscapes and the interactions with properties and environment, and is currently doing some work in Hackney, and will tell us about community SuDS and um, properties, household and properties. If you're ready, Marcus, over to you.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the introduction, Paul. Just share my screen. Yeah, thanks for those two presentations, Rishi. That was really interesting. I have some questions about potentially in the future how you overcome those sort of legal agreements and tie in the flood benefit. Yeah, and I'm going to talk a bit about sort of community householder level SuDS, and trying to contextualize some of those issues that Alice mentioned at the start around quantifying the benefits of them and understanding where they can have their impact, and look at a community-led project in Hackney, and then another project that's currently going on in Lewisham, where we're looking at modelling the impact of property level measures. So as Alice, I won't stick on this for too long, but ultimately, due to our urban environment and how we've developed our urban environment over years, we face certain environmental risks. One of those is flooding. So picture on the right is of Catford in 1968. It's the sort of last major fluvial river flooding incident in South London. And then a picture of on the right is surface water flooding, and that's due to our urban environment, nowhere for water to go. And yeah, it flows over land and causes flooding to property, but also road infrastructure. And I guess both these images show how our the urbanized nature of our urban environment has exposed us to these risks. After that river flooding incident in Catford, our river networks were engineered to move water away as quickly as possible. But ultimately, it doesn't deal with that root cause of the risk, which is ultimately dealing with the volume of water, and also pollution issues. So what am I saying? Property level SuDS can help tackle some of these issues, and it's about thinking how we where we put them, and and to what extent they can have that impact. So just quickly, just to think about where runoff comes from. So this is just a pie chart to show different land uses. This is an area in Camden, but it's pretty representative of the whole of London, and like almost a third of surface in London, so that's both permeable and impermeable surface, is made up of roof area. So it's a real large amount of area, a lot more than highways and footways. And also another third, almost a third, is made up of private gardens. And ultimately, there's so much sort of terraced housing that isn't going anywhere in London. It's not going to be developed. And how can we utilize these spaces better to manage flooding? I think sort of Alice mentioned earlier, she showed the sort of Thames water areas where Thames Water need investment to increase capacity. And I think sort of Thames Water produced this drainage and wastewater management plan a few years ago, and this document comes up with this area of 5% of London's surface needs to be retrofitted to drain through SuDS measures. So I think that's like before 2050. So that's about 70,000 football pitches. So huge area. And it's like, if we don't start utilizing gardens better, then it's going to be difficult to get to those targets. So how can we utilize gardens? I've just taken this image. This is, a few years ago, Chelsea Flower Show Garden just showed how garden spaces can really store large volumes of water. And then the image on the right is just a planter. So it's a planter that designed and installed to manage roof runoff. I think it stores about 250 litres of water. And basically what wants to do is to see how many sort of what Rishi spoke about earlier. Could I go to my neighbours in Homerton and see if they can, we're up for installing property level SuDS measures within their garden, and then could we then use those residents to come together and put in an application for funding from Thames Water. So I think sort of one of the issues I've noticed through working within this space and speaking to residents is there are a lot of sort of products on the market at the moment to manage like water butts and rainwater planters. A lot of them are sort of recycled plastic or maybe not the most desirable products. So it's like, can we think of other ways to engage people and use different sort of materials to manage water in their gardens? So we went round to a few, just as a pilot study, went round to a few properties in Homerton and wanted to see if people were interested in installing these measures, but we wanted to also see if they're interested in ultimately contributing to the install of these measures. So it wouldn't just be the Thames Water who would pay for them, the residents would also contribute. and we went round to a number of properties. And yeah, I think sort of agreed to install 38 planters that would manage 8,000 litres of water. And we're currently in the process of submitting this application to Thames Water to see if we can get funding to then go and deliver it. And so we offered residents different options in terms of planters, whether they wanted sort of standard recycled plastic planter or a wooden clad planter or a quarten planter, and the residents would then sort of pay at different levels for each of those planter options. But yeah, we're currently still waiting to hear back from Thames Water whether this sort of first round is installed. And I guess the interesting thing from this perspective, it's not driven from a local authority perspective, it's driven from a community and residents perspective. So if it is viable to get the funding from Thames Water, then it just shows there's basically a model there for other people to go out and engage their residents and their neighbours to try and do more climate resilient measures within their gardens and yeah, facilitate that increase in adaptation that's needed. Okay, so we're currently working with London Borough of Lewisham, and we're looking at the Honor Oak Stream area, which is a small sort of subcatchment of the Ravensbourne within Crofton Park and Ladywell. And we're basically modelling the impact of installing rain gardens, but also the impact of installing water butts or storing a certain amount of water within gardens and within front and back gardens. And I think the interesting thing, so we modeled different scenarios. So one scenario we looked at was if every property installed a 200 litres of storage, so in effect a large water butt that would drain before a storm. And then we modelled what would it look like if each resident installed a water butt and rainwater planter. And I think, like what was really interesting is ultimately this showed that both installing a rainwater planter and or a water butt had significant flood risk benefits. And so over that catchment, if you installed rainwater planters and water butts at specific properties, it showed that you could get flood risk funding to do that. So now we're working with Lewisham Council to try and build a business case where we look at both installing street level SuDS, but also look at doing property level measures. And so that's based on, so for 25 square meters of roof, could we install a 200 litre planter and or a 200 litre water butt? Yeah, that's it. Very brief update, Paul.
Terrific. Just a quick one on that. What's your
Sure.
timescale on the Lewisham project? When are you looking to produce that business case?
Yeah, we're writing it now, basically. So it'll be it's looking at over a 5-year period, lots of different measures. So we're in the process of drafting it for Lewisham now. It's just trying to agree the Environment Agency's model for getting flood risk has changed. So there's a bit of uncertainty about specifically what goes in to it. But yeah, we're in the process of drafting it now and looking to secure 5 years worth of flood risk money for SuDS within the Honor Oak Stream catchment.
Okay, good. Okay, good. So I can see there's quite a few questions come in on our first presentation. Add more to that and more to add in the chat. Any questions for Marcus? And I was going to say, Ruchi and Marcus, if questions come in that you're able to answer in the chat, that's good. If you want to wrap them up at the end verbally, that's fine too. So, our last presenter is Amber, who's going to, we're also, the watery theme continues beautifully. It flows even. And you're going to, you're from Waltham Forest, aren't you? You're going to, sorry, my screen has gone. And you're looking at street by street methods to lower flood risk. So I'll hand over to you to say more about your role and your project. Thanks, Amber.
All right, thanks, Paul. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes, I can.
Yep. All right, fantastic. Yep. So as Paul said, I'm Amber de Rosa. I'm the Climate Engagement Manager here in Waltham Forest. So our project that I'll talk to you a bit about today is lower floods. So we started our pilot back in 2023, and we're now in the fourth wave of it. So it's very similar to what else has been going on, but we're just, I think, a bit further forward with it. So I won't go too much into the problem behind it, because we know that, but there's a picture here of one of our streets during a flood. So we thought, what can we do? We need to, what if lots of small actions are what will make a big difference here? So that was the idea behind it, really. Back in 2023, we had a think. We decided that the solution here would be about installing self-emptying water butts and water-saving devices. We wanted to make sure that it was free and that it was quick for residents. They are designed to slow the water from entering the drainage system, so very similar to before. Mostly our water butts are this sort of standard, plastic water butt style, but we do have some of those pretty planter ones that we're giving out as well. So yeah, the concept here is that it's not just one home, but it's whole streets and whole communities acting together here. Why is this not clicking on? There we go. So this is what it looks like at scale. So our pilot, which I'm calling wave 1, and then waves 2 and 3. So everything was spread right across the borough. What we did was we mapped out where the high risk flood areas in the borough were, and we targeted those first off. So particularly in the pilot, we really piloted particular high flood risk areas, high flood risk streets, and then streets that are sort of uphill from those as well. So between waves 1 to 3, we had about 500 installs. We're now on wave 4, and we've opened it up to residents across the whole borough, and we're hoping to do another 500 sort of between March and August this year. So hopefully by the end of the summer, we'll have about 1,000 water butts installed across the borough. So yeah, what's working here is that it's this sort of large scale, but also the clustering of it is having a real impact. So, lots of residents within a small area clustering together and collecting that rainwater has the most impact here. We're fast to deliver, it builds community ownership. It's quite low cost, obviously no cost to the resident here, but it's about £180 to install the butt, plus about £40 for the unit itself. So it's very good value. Thinking about front gardens in particular, we try and install some of these. They can be front or back gardens. But if it's in the front, it does encourage residents to improve and care for their front gardens. It provides water then as well for plants, trees, greening in the street as well, which can be a big problem during the summer months. And then obviously, making it a bit more visible sparks these conversations with neighbours. And that's been quite key actually in getting this to work, is this sort of engagement from the residents and within their communities. So in terms of challenges, so one of the biggest challenges in the beginning was building that sort of early trust in the project. Making sure that we're able to respond to residents quickly, install the water butts quickly. One of the big challenges for us has been explaining a benefit that isn't always visible. So I think, particularly in the pilot stage, when we were targeting the streets that were, high flood risk areas, it was a bit easier to talk to the residents about the problem. But, in other areas, it's not so easy. So that's a bit of a challenge at the moment. And then obviously the usual reaching those residents who aren't usually engaged in this. So, it's very easy to reach the people through our climate newsletter and things like that. But getting those homes where people aren't actively engaged in this sort of activity is always a bit of a challenge. And then sort of practical installation constraints. So a lot of the properties around here have cast iron downpipes, and we need UPVC downpipes for this to work. So that's just another little challenge here. Oh, hang on. So yeah, just a few quick lessons learnt here. So yeah, we started our pilot on one street back in 2023, which was fantastic because it gave us that opportunity to sort of start small, figure out the kinks, see what's working, what's not working. We're really focusing on collective impact, not just individuals. So, when the install team go out to install a water butt for a resident, they'll then knock on the doors either side and ask those residents if they want one as well, because it's really about, getting as many people in a small cluster to have them as we can. Working through trusted local networks. So the residents sort of sharing this on their street WhatsApp groups is working really, really well. And making sure that it's simple and it's fast and it's visible and it's free for the resident. So yeah, in terms of what's next, we're currently in wave 4 of the project. So as I say, we're hoping to have installed about 500 by the end of the summer. We've expanded into new areas, so it's now open to all residents in the borough, not just those who live in those high-risk areas. We're also expanding into parks and allotments a bit, though it's a bit challenging because obviously we don't have the same roof capacity as we would, on a house if you're just using a shed. But, it's allotment plot holders obviously love this because they often don't have access to a water supply on the allotment. So, being able to get a free water butt or a few free water butts is really useful. And having it in parks as well is fantastic. Also trialing this really cool monitoring device, which we're hoping to get going in the next few weeks. And it's basically, it measures how full the water butts are. It links to an app on the resident's phone, or if we're using it on a park or an allotment, it would link to the app on that the park manager's phone. It tells you how full the water butt is. It will alert you if it needs emptying, and then you can empty it from the app. You can just click on empty and it will empty the water. And it also links up to the weather forecast as well. So if there's a lot of rain coming in, it will give you 12 hours notice so that you can empty that water butt to ensure that it's empty before the rain comes. So that, the pressure on the drainage system is then sort of spread across a few different days. So that's a couple of things that we're just sort of we're trialing out, and we're planning forward with that one. That's my very quick summary.
That's great. Thank you, Amber.
Right.
I love the idea of a smart water butt.
Oh, it's cool, isn't it? It's maybe cool is the wrong word, but interesting. So yeah, maybe I can report back on that maybe once we've piloted that. But yeah, it's
smart meters, smart water butts, smart bins, smart everything. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, to be able to stagger that rainwater reaching the drain. So to know, there's a lot of rain coming tomorrow or the next day, you need to make sure that you can empty that water butt before the rain comes so that your butt is empty, ready to collect all the rainfall. It's quite cool.
Yeah, interesting. Great. Well, brilliant. We've got plenty of time for chat and discussion if people want to dive in with questions. There are some in the chat already. I'm just going to go back. So Tamazin said, thanks, that's amazing, absolutely fascinating to see how that's worked in action, Amber. So thanks very much for that. Just on your presentation, Emma, what next then, apart from smart butts and what have you? You've kind of tried to be targeted, and then you're going broader. Two questions for me arise from that: is, well, how do you still need to do the work at the areas which are more vulnerable? Presumably, you still want to do that, and what's the plan for that? And then, and I mean, presumably you're keeping tabs on how this is all adding up in terms of outputs or results or reduced risk.
Yeah, exactly. So so we've got a we've got some monitoring around how much water is being saved or redirected and things like that, and how many litres all of these water butts hold. So yeah, most of the areas that were high risk were covered in the pilot and waves 2 and 3. So that's why we've now extended it out to everybody. Obviously, next steps are to just keep on going. We've got, if we have 1,000 of these water butts, by the end of this year, then hopefully we just keep applying for funding. I think I must have skipped over my slide that talked about the funding and things, but it's Thames Water funded.
Well, they've got loads of money, right? And they're perfectly stable as a company, right? I mean, what happens if Thames Water does slip into, well, let's not even go there. But yeah, okay, well, yeah, Thames Water is being looked at potentially for a source of a lot of this stuff, which does raise questions about what happens if, doesn't it? So, okay, thank you. I was going to ask, I was just going to go back to Ruchi as well. And Alice, I see you've got your question up because you asked straight up about the whole issue of also looking at de-paving. There's a tendency to put in kit like water butts or rain gardens, but if you're putting in a water butt on a front garden that's been completely lost to hard surfacing, you've still the psychology of this is, oh, don't worry, the water butt will cope, isn't there?
Yeah.
There's a human psychology that says, "Oh, we'll just buy a bit of kit, that will solve it all." Alice, do you want to ask that question in your own words or add
Oh,
with
well,
another
it
one?
was really just to say that I know that when we'd spoken before, Amber, I'd spoken to a colleague of yours, that you talked about using the opportunity to install or to do the project to actually talk to people. And I just wondered if either of you had talked about de-paving at the set, or even Marcus, even when you were leafleting, whether you talked about de-paving and regreening at the same time as talking about installing water butts.
Uh, Probably I can go. Yeah, we offered 3 options initially of a water bed suds planter and that which were fully funded, but partial funding of the de-paving or greening options. There has been just few interest recently on that because of course we are quite in the initial stages to implement it. But yeah, but those options were offered on partial funding basis rather than fully funding them.
Yeah, we're not able to offer anything for de-paving at the moment, but as I said, when our team are out there and they're installing the water butts, and when we speak to them beforehand, and when we have all the comms, we make sure we try and get everybody signed up to the newsletter. For example, we try and make sure that we can use their details so that we can then get in touch with them when we can do something around de-paving. And I think, even being able to have the conversation with residents to say, to explain the problem and, the stress on the drainage system, to talk about how actually, just slowing down that flow of water from your roof into the drain, how that can make such a huge impact, because, people don't know this. So having those conversations sort of sparks something, and it does kind of grow from there. We've noticed people becoming much more engaged in other things as a result. We've got a few rain gardens and, community planters and things like that. And those sorts of schemes have picked up as well. So I think generally when just having that opportunity to get out there and talk to 1,000 residents here about different things has been really useful. Yeah.
That's great. That's great. I don't know if Marcus, you had anything to add in around Homerton, but just quickly before, I just also wanted to ask if there is a network of well, I know there's a flood officers network, and I saw James from RBKC's there on the call. Sorry, I know that people can't chat because we've had to run secure webinars now, but if there is a group that can learn from this, or that we can circulate this webinar to, so that we can make sure that people in other boroughs who are tackling the same problems have access to this. I just wondered if there's a network there, or if we can circulate it to the flood officers network or something. Are either of you part of a network or maybe James, if you write in the chat, James at RBKC. But Marcus, I don't know if you have anything to add on the promotions issue around de-paving.
Yeah, I think ultimately we need more funding. We need easier routes to actually get funding to do this. And I think like through the environment, I think that project I talked about in Crofton Park, then actually we can not just Thames Water, but we can look at how we build business cases to de-pave through the Environment Agency as well, and through the DEFRA EA program, where we can ultimately understand the cost of a meter squared of hard standing on flood risk in an area, in an at-risk area, and then we can use that as a tool to communicate better with councillors and with decision makers. So yeah, I think it's around having that better sort of information to build better business cases.
Just looking at the chat, Danila talked about successful trialling of public rain gardens in Merton, and then asked, how can we roll this out across boroughs? I don't know what your collective sense is of whether that actually is one of the ones that councils, local authorities are increasingly looking at doing, so that rollout is happening more often, or is it kind of still a nice idea but not quite getting around to it? Thinking. Any views?
No, I don't work for local authority anymore, so I'm happy to come in. I think some local authorities are really good at it, and others aren't. I guess it's difficult because it's not local authority owned land, and they're concentrating on highway land and other
Yeah.
land uses. I think at London level, through the London Surface Water Strategy and the money that's going to come into that, there's an opportunity to engage on a much wider strategic opportunity through that.
Yeah.
I think pressure.
Land ownership is key, isn't it? And there are local authority roads and streets, but there's TfL and some private as well. Carolyn also asked about Newham and the curbside greening project there, and the level of technical spec that Thames Water require, and whether the skills and knowledge and expertise exist in order to secure that funding to meet that kind of high level of tech. Have you got insights to that? How can that be made more, easier for people to be able to kind of that not to become another barrier to participation or and funding access? Is there a sense of they need your level of expertise, Marcus, or someone else's to stand a chance of getting funding?
I think they probably at the moment it's difficult because you have to show Thames Water will want to understand how that thing's functioning and how it's actually providing a betterment to their network. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's not very too
You're going to
simple
need
because you
some
need
technical input at
drawings.
some point. You can't just say we want to install some water butts. You've got to kind of produce the evidence and
I
sort of.
think through those Thames Water and Environment Agency funds, yeah, you're going to have to evidence it. I'm not sure. Potentially, they
Yeah.
could have smarter with Thames Water could easily say understand the value of installing a water butt from a water usage perspective, and they could roll out programs that were easier for people to tap into for sure. But potentially from a flood risk, it's more complicated.
Yeah.
Sorry, Rishi.
Ruchi, did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, so basically, when we started this pilot project, it was planned to be kind of funded from the DEFRA funding we had, but Thames Water co-funded it as we moved on, and basically we were asked to provide them the evidence of each property we are putting a planter or a water butt should be connected to do some dye testing to ensure that their property is connected to the sewer on the road, which we kind of push back that this cannot be done on each property we are installing, although we can do some sample testing, because sometimes there are like properties are on busy roads and you have to do road closures and all to open the manholes and do the dye testing, which will incur us a cost. And again, it's not cost effective anymore than to get that funding from Thames Water. So Thames Water launched their first property level SuDS funding program earlier this year, to which we fed back, and basically we said that this is too cumbersome request you're asking, and I think this feedback has been taken across, and they're probably now requesting more like sample-based testing rather than rigorous testing of each house, demonstrating the connection of that house to the sewer system. So like out of the 12, 13 properties we installed, we have done dye testing to one property to demonstrate on that street that this property is connected to the sewer.
Yeah, yeah. So there is a question that's just come in on the chat, actually. Is it Ariella? Asking if Barnet's offering discounted or help with installing water butts or SuDS. How are you promoting this among residents and encourage them to take this on? You did talk about that a bit, didn't you, in terms of how you started and the pilot phase and the whatever. But then you also talked about the need for follow through and continuity, so it builds, doesn't it, over time? Did are things discounted? And while I'm Amber, there's a question about these wonderful smart water butts. How much do they cost? What's the premium on them compared with an average water butt?
So I'll pop a link in the chat, shall I? So it's
Yeah.
an organisation called Blue Water Solutions, who got in touch with us because they've developed this monitoring thing. So I think if you have your own water butt, I want to say it's about £200 to £250 to have a 4G, to have solar and 4G, because it needs to link up to, it needs a power supply and it needs some broadband. Or it's about £90, I think, £100 if you have your own water butt, and then you can link it to your home Wi-Fi and your home power source. I mean, I think they're really cool. I think in the future it'd be incredible. Imagine if we had that in all of our local authority parks, and the parks team could just have an app, and if things need watering, they could just empty their water butts, and you had water butts all over the park, and they could just sit there with their feet up on the desk, just watering things from their phone. But I think also from a sort of resident perspective, it engages people in the process, and to be able to, I think, being more in touch with the rain that's coming, having that sort of sense of, oh, there's all this rain coming, that'll add pressure to the drains, we need to do something about it. Even just having it in people's minds, I think is fascinating stuff. So we're really excited to start this pilot, actually. I will pop a link to the product in the chat if that's useful for people.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Okay.
Yeah. Just a quick one. Marcus is Carol is asking if you share your email. I'll leave that to you to decide if you want to do a personal one to her. Ruchi, did you want to come back on that question I was asking about the help and support cost wise?
As of now, we are just doing in the Broadfields Estate pilot area, and we haven't expanded it across the borough. But the plan is, yes, eventually we'll roll out across wider areas. Depending on the funding we get from Thames Water or how much the project funding is, it would be either completely free or it would be discounted. So yeah, it's in the pipeline, but we don't have a firm kind of stance at the moment. But as of now, we're just getting the pilot area done, targeting the streets and basically getting the evidence base from them in terms of engagement and also the flood risk benefits, and then preparing a case to get more funding to roll it out wider. So that's the plan.
Yeah. Okay. So we're bang on time. There's no rush. People may well slip off, but there's no particular rush. I'll stay on as needed, and we'll follow up with the newsletter. Is there anything else that you wanted to say that you haven't said in terms of your presentations, or things that have come up as a result of hearing the conversation and the questions? Anything occurring? I mean, obviously you're focused on your particular projects, but what's your sense of how things are going kind of in neighbourhoods, the cooperation that's needed across these things are often transboundary, aren't they? They're not entirely limited. And how's it going? Are we stepping up as needed? Is it all a bit too piloty phase? When do we, is there a tipping point we'll move into mainstream? This will become mainstream, not exceptional.
I kind of feel like it isn't something that is well known by people. I think there is a kind of there's a there are people in London who own, you know, in inner London boroughs who own a property which is worth £500,000, £1 million, and yet they don't know. These people who may care about the environment, they don't know they are paving their front gardens, and they'll be spending quite a lot of money on it. Make it look nice. They want it to look nice. They don't know that that is a disaster. And I just feel like, part of the job really is just to get people to understand that. And what's so interesting about these projects is that it really helps people to get that, really helps people to understand that. But I also think that given that money is, basically a disastrous situation for councils, for Thames Water, for everyone in London, that we're going to have to rely heavily on householders or property owners. So it's not just householders, it's business owners, councils who will run schools and so forth, to themselves invest in those either de-paving or installing water butts or rain planters, water attenuation from property. So I think a lot of it is going to have to be led by communities or individual properties. And so I actually feel like, that kind of, getting journalists to talk about it, getting it in the news, getting it on social media is actually going to be quite important, really, for the whole of London.
Yeah.
But it is really interesting to see how Waltham Forest has kind of cracked it, or started to crack it, really, just by kind of inching away at properties all over the borough so that other people around them can see what's going on and why it matters. So, yeah, I kind of feel like you never quite know what is going to be the answer, do you, to getting people actually doing what's needed. It's probably a bit of everything, isn't it?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. I don't know if anyone wants to come back on my provocations. I noticed Christine Eberall, who's worked on this front gardens issue for Yonks in Ealing, and has worked with me and Alice more recently as part of building up this network and the London National Park City website. You can see a lot of Christine's blogs on the National Park City website that I provided the link to earlier. So do have a look at that. It covers a whole range of issues. But she's asking about the heat angle, if there's ways of also getting funding because of the heat angle, which is a rising issue, has been for a while, but particularly rising in urban areas. And obviously, we've got the Climate Change Committee's report about heat being one of the factors in the need to properly adapt to what's already locked in from climate change, because we haven't done enough in the past, as it were, let alone what will come down later. So we're talking about flooding, but flooding and heat kind of the same part of the same matrix, aren't they? So could that be an angle to future funding issues? But I'm chucking loads of questions. I'm not expecting complete answers, but if anyone wants to pick up on any of that before we finish, feel free to dive in. I will leave a moment of silence for the gap to be filled.
Well, I'll try and fill it quickly because I think like having a look at land use and what London's made up of, there's too much roof and garden area for it not to be critical to be activated at some point in time. So I think like over the next 10, 15 years, like mu many more gardens are going to be climate resilient gardens or they're not going to survive ultimately. And I think we need to be sort of going further in the design of those spaces and trying to understand how we can design more rain gardens within private gardens, use water better and do it at a lower cost. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's like, what products are there on the market? It's very hard to find them. It's very hard to find anyone who's doing that. Like, I can't just make a call and say, I've got, 500 quid. What can you, what can you do for me in the way of, water attenuation or de-paving or whatever. There aren't really companies doing that. And I wonder if that will become a commercial thing sometime in the next few years. Maybe there'll be some, entrepreneurial types who start to offer it more as a service, and then then councils won't have to do it so much or something like that. Maybe that's going to be the way of the future. I certainly think that that's that there is an opportunity, and it surprises me that it hasn't really been picked up by anyone yet wanting to make a pile of money.
Couple of reflections. Question Ariel has asked the question about what about the law, changing the law. Well, yeah, indeed. Trying to get the front gardens issue onto the agenda and get the government to change the planning rules that were and one of Christine's blogs does go into this about the origins of this issue of the loss of front gardens being related to the decisions made by the John Major-led Conservative government way back when, and the Ministry of Housing government, local government, just being increasingly blind to the issue. But one of the things that we have done over the past 2 or 3 years is to try to put this whole issue and agenda on the agenda of the likes of the National Infrastructure Commission and Ofwat and others. And to some extent, we've done that, and we've done it, almost, on running on empty. Just a few of us kind of trying to make it, putting letters to people and pushing it at events and conferences and things like that. So we've come a long way in a relatively short time. But I think, I think we're either really set on mainstreaming this and saying, look, everyone's got a part to play. It makes a lot of sense. There is also a way of turning this into a financial benefit, not just seen as a cost saving or a cost avoidance issue. I know Marcus and I have talked in the past about how could we flip the maths on it, flip the numbers, so you actually can turn it into something where you can give a dollop of money and all the help and support, and the trusted help and support in particular, because people are cautious about who they get to do their work on the whole. And so you come up with a totally new model that people buy into, and it'd be great if, Mayor of London could come in, make it easier, and then it creates a better framework for all the good work or pilot work that is going on at local authority level or catchment level. I guess that's kind of one of the things I'm quite keen to see at some point, but one can only dream. So yeah, we should wrap up. It's been really fascinating hour and a bit, and a bit. Thanks very much to Amber, Ruchi, and Marcus for kind of presenting on some real on the ground projects with some really good lessons and scalability, I suppose. That's the potential to build and scale it. We'll put links in the newsletter. If you haven't joined the network yet and you want to, the link is in the chat, or just drop Alice or me a line. If you've got ideas for future speakers or topics at meetings or for the newsletter, again, ditto. Thanks very much for joining, and we'll circulate the link to the presentation and tell more people about it. And thank you very much to Amber's home resident, who clearly is fascinated by the subject, which is always good to see. The next generation.
Yeah. Sorry, teacher strikes.
There we go. Teachers.
Get them back to school quick.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone, and see you soon. And any questions, stay in touch. Let us know what would work for you. And thanks very much.
Thanks.
Bye now.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.